Um, Happy 1-year anniversary of Achieving Together, everyone. We are here on this call to celebrate our 1-year anniversary of Achieving Together, to reflect on where we are now, to celebrate and acknowledge some of the actions and changes that have happened in the past year so that we can be really intentional about moving into 2020. So as we check in with ourselves and with one another, I'd love to take a couple of minutes just at the start of the call to reflect on the journey that we've been on over the past 2 years. And whether you were with us 2 years ago or if this is your first time calling in, we're just going to kind of walk through. My invitation is that you close your eyes if you're not driving. And if you're driving, please keep your eyes open. But just take a minute to tune out from the screens and think back to 2 years ago, October 2017, and Shelley Lucas, the Texas AIDS director, spoke at the Texas HIV Syndicate meeting about why the time was right for Texas to create a statewide plan to end the HIV epidemic. And she asked the Texas HIV Syndicate, the planning group for the state, if they would like to be the leaders in creating such a plan. So if you were there, imagine yourself back in that room. If you weren't there, imagine yourself in that room. What were you thinking? What's one word that comes to mind that describes what you thought when Shelley Lucas introduced the idea of the Texas HIV Syndicate creating and ending the epidemic plan?
Finally.
Finally, Helen says. So then, of course, the answer was yes. The answer from the syndicate was yes, we're going to move forward with this. So we moved into 2018, which was an intense year of work group meetings, a summit, community engagement, creating drafts, revising those drafts, having circles moving across the screen with different bubbles and words and changing and flexibility, and everybody kind of being on board, working together to plan, to create this plan, to revise the plan, to launch Achieving Together at the Texas HIV STD conference. And finally, in November 2018, the booklets were printed, Achieving Together, Lográndolo Juntos, and the website was launched. And 1,000 members of the Texas HIV Syndicate, Texas HIV workforce gathered in the ballroom of the JW Marriott Hotel in Austin, Texas. And Achieving Together partners shared powerful testimonials and presenting the plan. The Truth Project brought heart and art through poetry, song, videos. And so imagine yourself back in that ballroom if you were there. Imagine the first time you held Achieving Together in your hands. You saw it on the website. And what's one word to describe how you felt as we launched Achieving Together in November 2018? Really bring that word to your mind. So then moving forward from the conference, you all went back to your communities, you went back home as ambassadors of the Achieving Together movement, and you may have shared the plan with your colleagues and community. You may have brought that vision and the guiding principles of the plan of Achieving Together into your work. You may have started to implement some actions. You may have started to change the way you worked. And so reflecting on that past year since the launch of Achieving Together, since November 2018, what is one word to describe how your work has changed since Achieving Together launched in November 2018? What is one word to describe how your work has changed since Achieving Together launched in November 2018? And if you have a word in mind, you can share it in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So type your word in the chat, and then Catherine is going to do a little visual magic with the words that we...
Jennifer, can you see the screen that we're supposed to see?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, you'll have to give me a second here.
And if you have more than one word, you can put more than one word in there. And for people who are on the phone, you can press *6 to unmute yourself and share your word. And what Catherine's doing is entering all these words and creating this really cool word cloud so that you can see the words that that people have said that how their work has changed in the past year, becoming more collaborative, empowered, strategic, momentum, synergy, focused, energized, driven, informed. Collaborative seems to be and focused and strategic, optimistic. Got some more words up there. Possible, deliberate, synergy, busier, happy, achievable, optimistic. So if you look at this word cloud, and you'll notice that we do this a lot in our check-ins, you know, at these meetings with these, you know, sort of one word and one phrase, and we can kind of capture sort of the essence of where the group is and where we all are in our work. And as we think about moving forward, I'm going to take the screen back from Catherine, and we'll share this back with you, this image.
Have one more.
One more, achievable. But
let me stop the share here.
These are really good touchstones to kind of mark where we are in time. And we have the words from 2017, the words from 2018, and the words from today. And so I am going to go back to the PowerPoint. And so as you think about what's changed in your work, we want to kind of do a little year in review, what happened in 2019. And this may be the first of many 2019 year in reviews that you will get to experience this year. And hopefully we're the first. So I'm going to turn it over to Jesse, Ann, or Rosa to talk about some of the things, highlight some of the changes that have happened kind of in the environment over the past year.
Hi, everyone. So nationally, what we've heard from the administration is they put forth an ending the HIV epidemic plan, and it set goals, and it touched on 4 pillars, which are diagnose, treat, prevent, and respond. And so I think folks were excited about that. What it also did was it put out additional funding for jurisdictions, 50 jurisdictions through both CDC and HRSA. 5 of those being in Texas, the major cities, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio. And they've gotten the opportunity to apply for funds both through HRSA and to receive funds through CDC through DSHS. And again, the goal of these funds, part of the funds are to plan strategically on how they will end their HIV epidemic in those large urban communities, as well as implementation, which is addressing how to get folks in rapid antiretroviral therapy, how to get folks linked to care, how to get folks supportive services that help them keep them into care. So they're looking at also trying to support services. So this is a surprise, I think, for us, but a welcome surprise. Addressing stigma, and feel free to interrupt me. Addressing stigma, several celebrities came out to talk about HIV. The football or soccer player out of the UK. Oh, sorry, rugby. I know it was ball. And the gentleman from Queer Eye, maybe not. Okay, anyway, so they came out, and a few other folks that very publicly came out and talked about their HIV status. Support for inclusive language, including Latinx, they and them, has changed the discourse in our communities. AMA defined violence against transgender community as an epidemic. And again, we in Texas, and especially we in Texas, have seen that violence firsthand with trans women being murdered, and how that hits our community, and the painful reality of what that means for our communities. And then the APA also endorsing the use of they as a singular pronoun. So making headway in addressing stigma and using supportive person first language. We have had advances in HIV vaccine research. We have promising on the horizon, promising HIV treatment and prevention, long-acting HIV treatment and prevention. And we have had uptake on and conversation around treatment as prevention and support for U equals U by local communities and across the state. In Texas specifically, Dallas became a fast track city, joined San Antonio and Austin, and of course Houston had led the way with their ending the epidemic efforts, actually before in 2017. There are more PrEP programs, and there's the initiation of Rapid Start or Rapid Initiation of ART, that those programs are popping up across the state. And San Antonio is launching their long-awaited needle exchange program, which is a pilot, and we're all watching that program. So that's what's going on in Texas. Those are structural changes that will change the face of how we move forward.
Good morning, everyone. And so to share some updates around health equity that's taken place in Texas since the launch of our Achieving Together plan. We've had our statewide health equity technical assistance and capacity building calls. So every month we have calls around a specific topic that people request based on things that they'd like to learn more about. And we've had guest speakers present on those topics to help people learn new topics and how to incorporate that into their work to actively address inequities across the state. We've launched our Texas Health Leaders Fellowship program. And so we've put that together, sent out applications, and we're currently reviewing applications for fellows to help focus on leadership development around among communities of color, Latinx, Black, gay and bisexual men, and transgender individuals across the state. to really encourage involvement in HIV prevention and care, and develop those skills needed to be a part of the workforce. We've also continued our microgrant projects where we've provided small amounts of funding to 12 projects across the state to address some of the leading causes to the disparities that we see for our priority populations across the state. And then we've also worked on our Texas Transgender Alliance. We've created a research knowledge assessment. So we sent out this resource knowledge assessment across the state and got close to 300 responses from transgender individuals and gender nonconforming individuals across the state around where they access information related to healthcare or related to gender identity, what are some of their barriers to accessing that information. We've also convened a steering committee of transgender individuals across the state to help inform our work and guide where this project is going. And so the information that we've collected, we're working on creating a database to be able to provide this information to individuals across the state around what services exist for transgender individuals to help with gender affirming care, to help with accessing healthcare, and all this information so folks don't have to be left in the dark and can find that information that's specific to Texas. So those are just a few of the updates that we've had specific to health equity, but we continue moving forward with the help of our Achieving Together plan.
Rosa, do you want to walk through this or do you want me to?
You can walk through that, Jennifer.
Okay. So just again, this is all sort of what's been, everything Rosa and Chris shared, and then this is sort of this sort of at a structural level, what's happened in 2019. And so in terms of the Texas HIV Syndicate and Achieving Together, the Achieving Together website has posted and sent out weekly blog posts, often featuring voices from the community, sharing their perspective, their personal experience, their expertise. And those continue to go out to a growing list of subscribers to the Achieving Together website. There are various social media platforms that have been growing, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We've expanded the website to include a calendar of events, and many people are sending in their events that are happening around the state. And so that gets posted, as well as all of these kind of calls and the population affinity group calls. We've added an overview of HIV in Texas and an interactive data map by region so that people can hone in on data for their specific area. So that's sort of all the digital side of things. In terms of in-person interactions or person-to-person interactions, we've had 5 population affinity groups that have been meeting monthly from about March or April until through November. There's been a formation of a public policy work group that will continue on into next year to focus on identifying policy issues that they want to address. This conversation, Achieving Together Conversation series launched with some national speakers on various topics, and will continue to move forward just as opportunities for people to engage with one another around the themes, the goals, and the actions of Achieving Together. And then finally, Achieving Together got to be highlighted at the U.S. Conference on AIDS this year. We had several members of the UT Austin team, as well as 8 Achieving Together partners in Washington, presenting the Achieving Together plan and facilitating an interactive workshop with about 40 participants who got to experience the magic of Achieving Together firsthand. So that's sort of setting the stage. And I noticed there's a couple of comments in the chat. So Lionel wrote that they must understand that we must think of things outside the box, acknowledging what we've done so far hasn't worked to the extent that we would like. And if I'm interpreting that in the way you intended, Lionel, I think it's that in all of this, looking at the, what's happened in how to move forward, we really want to be thinking big, broad, innovative, and this phrase that's been going around of disruptive innovation, that this isn't business as usual. We need to do things that we're in a new era, and we need to do things that strategically break out of the boxes that we've been in. And Amber writes that out in West Texas, there's an organization in Midland, Odessa, that provides support and resources for the transgender community. So that's, thank you for sharing that, Amber, and we'll make sure that that is connected in with the work that Chris and the Texas Transgender Alliance are doing. So that's just it's a broad overview just to recognize and acknowledge that as we move through time, things change, and we want to sort of see what's the landscape that we're in now. We also want to share some more specifics about what you all have been doing and what your colleagues in the Achieving Together movement have been doing. And as a reminder, Achieving Together partners are members of the Texas HIV Syndicate and other stakeholders who are committed to working to end the HIV epidemic in Texas. And this fall, UT Austin conducted a survey of the about 120 people who are on our Achieving Together contact list to find out how their work has changed in the past year. And 60 people responded to the survey, so thank you if you were one of those 60 people. And we asked people about how they're incorporating the guiding principles into their work. We asked them about what's changed in their work in the past year, and we asked about their involvement in the Texas HIV Syndicate. And we had, of those 60 respondents, the people who responded reflected the geographic diversity of the state in the syndicate, as you can see in this, in the graph, and 55 out of those 60 were Texas HIV Syndicate members. So as I mentioned, the first set of questions looked at the guiding principles, and we asked people to rank the 6 Achieving Together guiding principles in 2 ways. So first, we asked them to rank the order in which the guiding principles currently influence their work. And then we asked them to rank the order in which they would like to enhance the guiding principles in their work next year. And so looking at both of those questions and the average responses and the range of responses, we noticed that, that the responses tended to trend in a particular direction. And that was that for both questions, the 2 guiding principles that ranked number 1 and number 2 were equity and community, meaning that those were the guiding principles that people on average felt most influenced their work currently and that they would like to enhance in the next year. The 3rd and the 4th guiding principles, or ranked guiding principles, were advocacy and integration of systems. And the 5th and 6th ranked guiding principles were social justice and empowerment. And so in looking at this, you can kind of see the trends, but we have to take this a little bit with a grain of salt, because in the write-in responses afterwards, a lot of people wrote that it was really hard for them to rank the questions because of how interconnected they are in their work. And so looking at what people wrote in their comments, we asked people to write any thoughts that they wanted to share about the guiding principles and how the guiding principles influence their work. And we themed the responses into 3 broad categories. The first was that the guiding principles, people said the guiding principles are really interconnected with each other and also deeply interconnected and connected into the work that they do. And so as one person said, the guiding principles allow me to address any issue in its complexity and focus on what might be most important to move the needle. Sometimes it might take a priority review of systems integration. Sometimes it might take a priority effort on social justice and community. So if I prioritize any of these guiding principles, it's driven by the situation and issue at hand and balanced with the greatest and best impact it can have for individuals. A second theme of what people wrote about as they talked about the guiding principles was that the guiding principles of Achieving Together have been offering them direction and framework. And one of your colleagues wrote that the guiding principles give me a sense of freedom to do the work that needs to be done for communities. Principles like equity, advocacy, community, social justice affirm me, and I find these ones in particular empowering. And then finally, people wrote some specific comments about specific guiding principles. For example, someone wrote about equity that, hang on, I have something blocking my screen on that. Okay. So someone wrote about equity. We always try to keep in mind that not all will be able to access the service in the same way. And about empowerment, someone wrote, once people know that their input is important and will be considered, they are more likely to assist you. And then someone wrote about the integration of systems, that the success of ending the HIV epidemic will be seen as long as there is connection, understanding, and continual communication among all these entities that deliver services. So in looking at the guiding principles, we also asked specifically about the role of advocacy in people's work, and we asked, what have you advocated for in the past year? And what we learned is that Achieving Together partners are all advocates, and that they advocate for a wide range of things. So some of the most prevalent things that people said they advocated for, and these were write-in responses, were access to care, services, and medication. Inclusion of specific populations, and PrEP and PEP. Achieving Together partners are advocating for rapid start, linkage to care, and testing. They're advocating for the Achieving Together movement, education and awareness, and transgender wellness, for stigma-free climate and funding, supportive services, collaborations, mental and behavioral health, needle exchange, and 340B. The next section of the survey was a long checklist of actions from the Achieving Together plan, and it was grouped into the 6 focus areas of the plan. And we asked people to check all of the items that they had implemented or enhanced in their work in the past year since November 2018. And so looking across all of the focus areas and all of the items on the checklist, we pulled together the top 10 reported actions and changes of 2019. And in the spirit of end of year checklist, end of year top 10 list, we're gonna give you the countdown. So so the number 10, and again, keep in mind this is out of a list of maybe like 75 things. So local or organizational planning guided by the Achieving Together plan, and almost half of the partners said that they're doing this. Number 9 is initiating or enhancing PrEP or NPEP services. Number 8 was supportive care services across the continuum based on need. Number 7 was rapid start or rapid linkage programs. Number 6, outreach to transgender individuals. Number 5, treatment as prevention. Number 4, opportunities for community engagement and planning. Number 3 was promoting accurate messages. Number 2, conversations about achieving together within the Texas HIV workforce, with 75% of people responding that they had done this in the past year. And the number 1 reported action or change of 2019 was person-first language in written materials, policy, and face-to-face action interaction, with almost 8 out of 10 of the respondents saying that they had initiated or enhanced their efforts around this. So that was a lot, and I'm gonna pause and ask you, what stands out to you as we've surveyed the landscape? Oh, I didn't mean to stop sharing. As we survey the landscape of 2019.
This is Lionel from Dallas.
Hey, Lionel.
Yeah, one thing stands out that I didn't see reinforced education of those individuals outside of private sectors outside of Ryan White in regards to PEP, PrEP, and Rapid Start. And these are providers, whether it's nurse practitioners, emergency rooms. Because here in Dallas, our planning council has taken upon ourselves to go to the emergency rooms and try to get the doctors online with working with our HIV clients. And if we're going to end this epidemic, it's going to be imperative that we educate those private doctors, settings that are getting the individuals who have insurance who we might not readily see.
Thanks, Lionel. And Laura typed in the chat that what stands out to her is Rapid Start is really taking off, which I think sort of echoes on to your comment as well.
This is Helen in Dallas.
Hey, Helen.
What also impresses me greatly is that community Ryan White providers and regular community not related to Ryan White, they are excited about this program. Where its buy-in has increased so much, and that is significant if we're going to end the epidemic. And when you get you get buy-in from people about achieving together, when they think their opinions are going to be respected and their voice is going to be heard, and it's not just you coming to me because you're doing a survey, or you coming to me because of so-and-so. When they feel genuinely included, we are having great success. I'm in the Parkland cab, and we have had surveys and talking to every person who walks in the door, so to speak, on different days of the month. And we have subsequently started having Saturday clinic when they had not done that in past. And people care that we care, and we're getting so much participation. I love it. And with the Dallas HIV Task Force, I see the Dallas County Fast Track Initiative, the Ending the Epidemic Plan, the Integrated Prevention and Care Plan. I can see good communication and alignment. We're starting to do alignment so we can take that integrated plan and all these other plans, some plans that organizations have, because we're going to have to align structure and make sure there is appropriate sharing and reporting of successful actions. It's going to take all of that to end the epidemic and to help us to not work in silos.
And in doing this process, we're utilizing the individuals, respecting the individuals who are participating in these, which crosses several sectors, so that they don't have to go to a group of meetings. We can all silo into one and achieve the main objective and goals.
So if there's a stigma group with the Dallas Task Force and a stigma group with affinity group and and you have these subcommittee groups with the Ryan White Planning Council, you just can't. You have to have some structure and sharing of information between people doing the like things, or you're gonna burn them out.
Jennifer, in the chat, Cordella also mentioned a sense of cohesiveness that is enhanced by the federal response to ETE and HCV elimination.
Thank you. I just added that into this PowerPoint. I see another comment in the chat from Frank, acknowledging and including transgender people living with HIV in the ETE plan. What else stands out to people as they as we survey the landscape of 2019 and where we are now and where we might go next? So what we've heard is, you know, what's standing out to people is the rapid start taking off, the sort of broadening the scope of educating people and providers outside the Ryan White system, particularly around Rapid Start. We've got, at least in some places, community excitement and buy-in and being responsive to community really helps with that. This need to respect the people who are involved and kind of align, making sure all of these actions, all of these plans and programs and groups are aligned so that we're not having 7 meetings about stigma. We can all come together in one. The sense of cohesiveness that's been enhanced by the federal response to ETE and HCV elimination, and then also acknowledging and including transgender people living with HIV.
Yeah, but also on that same note, it may be a sidebar that the states, the World Census is now acknowledging in the census for the next year, they're including counting the transgenders, which falls in line with acknowledging that trying to get better numbers of actual transgenders that are out there.
Thank you for that. There's I just pasted a comment from the chat from Cindy Nelson. Next, how can we specifically get our arms around reducing stigma so people not preaching to the choir are educated? And I think that's a nice segue into the next section. That 2019, the focus of Achieving Together for 2019 was really on amplifying Achieving Together within the Texas HIV workforce, which may not always be like preaching to the choir, but it is sort of within our close networks. And thinking about moving into 2020, how do we broaden that? And I had a special request, so I'm going to stop sharing this for a moment. If you'll bear with me, Stephen said that he sent me an email, and he wanted me to share a picture, but Stephen, I'm not seeing that email. So if you can try again, I'm just refreshing, but anyway, I think he wrote it in the, oh, here we go. Let me get this. Okay, this is, I think this is Stephen today. So I'm just going to share this real quick. And Stephen said in the chat that he's out of the food bank today, but he is representing Achieving Together in his Achieving Together t-shirt. So so thanks for sharing that, Stephen. Now we have our visual image of you for the rest of the call. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, which is maybe not as exciting as that picture, but it does contain some animation, so maybe that'll be exciting. Okay. Okay, so now we're moving into the now what section of the call, as we think about implementing Achieving Together in 2020, we asked on the survey, we asked Texas HIV Syndicate members what they would consider to be a successful outcome of the syndicate in 2020. And we grouped the responses into the following categories: continued collaboration, strategic alignment of Achieving Together with local work, resource and best practice sharing, Achieving Together outreach, progress towards the Achieving Together outcomes, and finally implementing actions. Implementing actions was like the category that most of the responses fell into. And so what actions did people talk about implementing? And when we look at what actions people want to implement, they vary widely, as you can imagine, because everybody in this group, while we're all in this Achieving Together movement together, everybody's work is different. And so the actions included increasing services, treatment as prevention, U=U, PrEP, increasing access, working with community groups, testing initiatives, funding, reducing stigma, education and awareness, amplifying the Achieving Together plan, and needle exchange advocacy. And
hey, Jennifer, Amber put an action in the chat.
Oh, great.
That would be great to share.
So thanks for calling my attention to that. So Amber said that she's been facilitating an education group weekly at a behavioral health center to parolees once a month. And by doing so, she's been able to break down stigma associated with HIV. Each time I find they are actively engaged and asking questions about HIV. Thanks. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Amber. And so I think as we look at that collaboration piece, and things like this, and opportunities for people to share what they're doing and how what's working well, what their challenges have been, how they've overcome their challenges, will be really helpful for everyone. This was a really sort of broad overview of the findings from the survey, but we have a lot more detailed information that can be used in planning and collaboration moving forward. This is just kind of like the tasting. So I think that it's great to hear about all of this. And as we think about moving forward, thinking about how to collaborate in a way so that people can really build on what everybody's doing. So moving into implementation and thinking about 2020 and the idea of 2020 and 2020 vision, being really clear focused vision, really thinking about how can we move into really strategic implementation, and someone used strategic at the beginning of the call, and thinking about how can we focus on the things that are going to have a big impact on reaching our goals. So like Lionel said, we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them. We need to find those things that are going to have the biggest impact, and take action on those. And so with everyone doing their part in a coordinated way, we can reach the goals of decreasing transmission and acquisition, of increasing viral suppression, eliminating health disparities, cultivating a stigma-free climate. And so we're going to walk through a very short thought activity. And if you have a pen and paper, you might take that out and jot some notes down. And because it's just to kind of start the process of focusing in on getting that 2020 vision clarity. And because we're on the phone and not in person, it's going to be really focused more on your individual work and remembering that we're all on this Achieving Together bus or train or monorail, whatever this is, together. So if you have a pen and paper, you can get it out. If you don't, then just kind of think through some of these things. So how do we cultivate that 2020 vision, that clear vision of what's going to have the biggest impact? So, so think about your role in the work of Achieving Together. Where does your influence lie? What are your strengths? Where can you have impact? And then in that role, with your influence, with your strengths, make a list of everything you could, should, or would love to do in 2020. And we'll just take a minute or two. And if you do have a piece of paper, just start writing down all the things that, some of the things you have to do because it's required, the things that you feel like you should do, maybe because you've always done it, maybe because someone else is asking you to do it. And then those things that you'd really love to do, that really just your dream projects. Okay, now I'm sure you could keep writing because you all do a lot. But just this is just to kind of get the ball rolling for getting that 2020 vision. So as we think about moving forward and we think about that list, we want to keep in mind that there are some things that could derail us or prevent us from moving forward. And this is from a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. He identifies 6 myths that often keep us from moving forward towards our goals, towards those big things that we want to have an impact on. And the first is that everything matters equally. And it's a myth because if you look at that list, he says in the book, we often spend too much time doing tasks that are not central to our goals. And there's a principle called the Pareto principle, which says that 20% of efforts lead to 80% of results. So the work really is to identify, in looking at all the things we could, should, or would love to do, what's the 20% effort that's going to have that big impact, that's going to get us those 80% of results, and then focus on that, focus on what matters, rather than focusing only on checking everything off the list. The second list is the myth of multitasking, and it's a myth because our brains can't hold 2 things as a primary focus at the same time. And every time we switch gears, it requires time for us to switch and reorient. So again, going back to figuring out what matters the most in a given moment and giving that your full attention. And it often requires saying no to other things. The third myth he identifies is a disciplined life. And this is really an interesting one, but what he talks about is that discipline takes a mental toll, and that actually it's habits that are second nature, and habits are what keep us moving forward. So he talks about, instead of trying to be disciplined all the time, to focus our discipline on developing the habits that are going to take us towards our goals, so that those things become second nature, and kind of that's our natural autopilot. The fourth myth, which is connected to that myth of discipline, is that willpower is always on will call. And again, willpower is a limited resource, and it starts out really strong. There's a lot of interesting research on this. It starts out really strong in the day and depletes over the course of the day. And it's tied in with decision making and with discipline. And so again, he goes back to decide what matters most and save your willpower for those things. The fifth myth is the myth of a balanced life. And what he talks about is that time on one thing naturally takes time away from something else. And so we're always making choices about how we're spending our time, our energy, our resources, and it makes balance impossible. And what we want to think about, instead of balance, like a balance scale where you have to keep everything stable and equals, we want to think of it more as a pendulum, where we, in our work in particular, we want to swing the pendulum towards that most important thing and focus a lot over there and keep our attention there for a while so that we can actually make progress on it before, or even complete it before shifting to something else. Whereas in our personal life, in our relationships, in our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, we want to think of that pendulum as moving a little bit in a shorter range, because you don't want, I'm not going to say to my kids, sorry, I only have time for you on Monday because Monday is my focus on you day, and you're going to have to wait till next Monday till you get my attention again. With those sort of things, we want to kind of tap into those things that we really value and care about on a regular basis. And then finally, the last myth that he talks about is that big is bad. And I always think of Miss Helen when I hear this one. And he writes, no one knows the limits of possibility. And small thinking will lead to small outcomes and keep you in a fixed mindset. So he says, set your goals so far above the original goal that your actions to reach that big goal will guarantee the success of the smaller one. And so adapt that growth mindset and don't be afraid to fail or to not reach that bigger goal, and to recognize the goals that you're reaching. So with all this in mind, what's the antidote to these 6 myths that might keep us from moving forward? And the antidote is that one thing, the one thing that, that will get us moving forward with intention, with clarity, and with focus. And so in thinking about your role in the work, and in looking at the list of things you could, should, or would love to do in 2020, what is the one thing that would have the most impact on reaching the goals of Achieving Together? And this is for you in your work. What's your one thing? If anyone wants to share, has an idea, and it may be that that your one thing's not clear right now, and it may be that you have one thing in a variety of different roles that you play.
This is like I have one. I put better infusions of impacted communities in equitable leadership positions to for proper representation of the population impacted.
Okay, would you share that one more time?
Better infusion of impacted communities better infusion of impacted communities in equitable leadership positions, proper representation of the population impacted. Meaning bringing the impacted community leaders to the table and putting them in paying leadership role where they can go and do the most impact into the community, as opposed to bringing an outside individual and trying to get them to incorporate, get infused into the community. Because we have a lot of great leaders out there already, but they don't feel like their voices are going to be heard. And then when they are actually coming to the table, we all too often bring them to the table and feed them pennies, and then we're getting paid properly. And then when they walk away from the table, what they had to integrate is not really acknowledged or represented.
Thank you. So that's Lionel's one thing of working towards better infusion of impacted communities in equitable leadership positions so that there's proper representation of the population impacted.
Hello, Jennifer. This is Frank Rosas from San Antonio.
Hey, Frank.
Hello. Actually, I just want to follow up on what Lionel said. And actually, Lionel and I are both people living with HIV, members of the Texas HIV Medication Advisory Committee, the THMP program. And at our last meeting, I don't like to toot my own horn, so to speak, but you know, I'm the new vice chair of the THMP MAC committee. So that's really important. It could be me or any other person living with HIV. And I think that falls in line with what Lionel is saying, what they've been stressing nationally, especially at the National Ryan White Conference I attended this past December. And like we had a group of consumers, a closed workshop that met with Dr. Laura Cheever, who's basically like number 2 at HRSA. And so, you know, you've been hearing this mantra of nothing about us without us. So it comes down to people living with HIV have to understand that you do have a place at the table, and you know, you have to be involved in HRSA stressing at all levels that people living with HIV should be involved in the decision-making process, even up to the, you know, at the top levels. And so when those opportunities present themselves to people living with HIV, you know, I think some people still feel like a little intimidated, or that they can't meet with an executive director of an administrative, you know, of the AA for Ryan White, or to even, you know, arrange a meeting with the executive director of an AIDS service organization. You know, we've been given that, what's the word I want to use? I don't want to say power, but, you know, we have that opportunity now. And so, you know, so people living with HIV, you know, we really can be involved at the top levels.
So is it
If that makes sense.
summarize as take an active role to bring my voice into the national conversation?
This is Helen. My one thing is to continue to dream big, but to also prioritize those things, no matter how long the list, prioritize the things and take one thing at a time and just go for it. Continue to live out loud, and so that my voice is heard for people who do not have a voice.
I'm going to add, I know we're over our end time. I'm adding a couple of things from the chat. This is the last portion of the call, but this, you know, hopefully this is a, you know, something that you'll continue to think about and will continue to be part of the conversation into next year. But Laura wrote that inspiring, engaging her team to be innovative and to reimagine their work. Lisa wrote, her one thing is to dedicate time to think about how she can infuse her work thoughtfully, almost like meditating on this purpose and outlining an implementation plan. You know, thinking about moving into 2019, into 2020, you know, think about what is your one thing, what is your role, what is your influence, and remembering that our progress lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing towards what will be, and to keep that future-oriented mindset, that dream big mindset, as we move into 2020. And I appreciate the time you all took to be on this call today. I hope you'll continue to explore how you might prioritize your work and how you might set intentions for your work, so that when the group comes together in 2020 to look at collaboration, you all can be moving forward intentionally and cohesively. So thank you all very much.